Yo, 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 what is up, YouTube? It's your boy BZCast. Today, we're back for something a little bit different. Today, we're going to be making my NBA playoff predictions. We're doing the NBA Pick'em Bracket Challenge. The winner, if you get a perfect bracket, you get $1,000,000. Why not me? So, let's get right into it with the Western Conference Series 1, OKC versus Phoenix. Now, I myself thought Phoenix would win the first game, against Portland, Golden State, or the Clippers. I really didn't think the Suns would get here. Now, the Suns are a good defensive team. That's a big part of their game. Now, the Suns also don't have a lot of big men. Mark Williams, also Iguodala. You know, you drafted Maluk. You got Rasheer Fleming. It's a really questionable room out there. I believe they signed Haywood Highsmith too, but it's a lot of what they do relies on the guards. Now, it's Booker, it's Jalen Green as the big two. Brooks has been really good. Then you got Gillespie, you got Ryan Dunn in there, you got Grayson Allen, Jordan Goodwin. That's a lot of guards, and I love their coach. I like what they got going for the future. They don't have their first round pick this year, which was a mistake, as Mark Williams hasn't shown as much as he did in Charlotte. He hasn't played as much, and he just hasn't been as good. And this is just a series where maybe Phoenix could take a game, but I doubt it. OKC has too much depth. They have too much quality defensively. The big men. I just don't think Phoenix will be able to stop them in any game. I think OKC in four. You got the best player on the court. You got the dominant part in that matchup that the Suns really struggle on. The Suns' defense, like I said, is really good, but it's going to be hard when you have so many good players on OKC. OKC is super deep. It's the same with San Antonio, similar with Boston. Those are just teams where it's just like you have so many mouths to feed and so many different avenues to go down where it's just, so good for you. Now, moving on to the Western Conference Series 2, the Lakers and the Rockets. Now, this didn't really change it after the Lakers won game one. I did expect them to win game one. Obviously, Kevin Durant was out. Crazy news, he got hurt during practice. Obviously, Austin Reeves and Luka Doncic have been injured. I don't expect them to play this series. Maybe Reeves could play the end of the series, but it doesn't really change a lot. For me, the Rockets are just a dysfunctional team. Fred VanVleet last year was a big glue guy for them. I felt like he had a huge impact on why they had a lot of success. Now he was injured most of the year. They struggled, obviously the KD Twitter stuff and Jabari Smith, you know, trashing him, trashing Sengun, you know, then you got Amen Thompson. I mean, this is a talented team. Like Amen Thompson, Reed Shepard, Tori Eason, and it's just not there. I like Ime Udoka. I like the hire, but he hasn't progressed his team, and they haven't taken that step. Last year, obviously, they were, you know, I believe the 3 seed. They played Golden State. They had high expectations. They lose to Golden State in 7. Obviously, you bring in KD. You want to one up. You obviously trade Jalen Green. You trade those picks. You want to improve on that, and we haven't just seen that yet. Well, the Lakers, they have LeBron. Kennard was an awesome trade. Vincent was not good there. Kennard's been awesome all season. DeAndre Ayton gets a lot of stick, but in a matchup against Sengun, who's not a good defender, I don't worry a lot here. I know Bronny's playing. You got a weak team. Rui, Van, Jackson Hayes been good too. They're getting good minutes from their bench, and that's what really matters in the playoffs. When your starters are out, when the minutes are without LeBron, what happens? Because those are the minutes where it's so crucial. When we, the Cavs back then, 2018 Cavs, you looked at that. Every time LeBron stepped off the floor, they were getting worse and worse. The lead, or they were down more and more, and LeBron just kept having to go in. He's 41. I love LeBron, bro, but I don't think he could do that anymore. So those are the minutes that matter. Today, it was much better. So I just think this is a way better coached team. I still think they're the better team in this series, and I think the Lakers win this one in Six. It's 6 or 7. I mean, it's hard because obviously the Rockets are going to play at home game 6, but you know I don't think it's going to go 7. I don't. Now the Nuggets and Timberwolves. This one I don't change my prediction. I like the Wolves in this one. They had a chance today. They did. They had a close game for most of the game. Then the Nuggets took a big lead in the, it was a tie game. They tied it up after coming back. Believe it was 78-78. And then they gave up like a 14 run. And then the game got away. What was good for them this series, or this game itself? Rudy Gobert was very good. Ant was okay. McDaniels was decent. Randall struggled. Nas Reed was bad. Io DiVincenzo struggled. I mean, it's just mental errors. The coaching has always been questionable. Chris Finch, he gets a lot of stick because it is a talented team and they haven't done enough. Obviously, their best accomplishment was, I believe, making Western Conference Finals, and they lost to Luka in 5 games, I believe. Obviously, they do that cat trade, cat for Randall. Randall needs to be better, and this is a series where I think he can. It's not like the defensive capabilities of the Nuggets. Big man is super good. Obviously, Aaron Gordon was once a very good defender, and he was he's very athletic. But Jokic, Valanciunas, these are guys who really can't guard at all. If you watched Jokic at all this year, you watch Valanciunas at all this year, these are guys who just don't play defense. You will see any center, any big man dominate them because they just cannot keep up and they just are just super one-sided. Jokic is one of the best players ever. He will go down in history as a top, 20, 15, whatever player. But his defense is absolutely horrific. And this is a team that also has, Cam Johnson, who's been worse defensively. Jamal Murray, who's a bad defender. Christian Brown's taken a step back defensively. And then you got, the bench, like I said, Valanciunas, Tim Hardaway. Those aren't good defenders. Bruce Brown, that's a better defender. You don't have a lot. Tyus Jones, Julian Strawther, Spencer Jones. Not a lot. I still think that Wolves win this in 6. I think the Wolves probably take game 2. I think, they got a lot of stuff to learn. Ant's got to be better, obviously, but Randall is the key to win this series, if anyone. And I think they could do it. The Nuggets really have just not impressed me this year. Uh, they were supposed to be a lot better. Obviously, they trade Michael Porter Jr., for Cam Johnson. What happens? Oh, shit, I hit the wrong thing. Let's go back. Hold on. All right, we're back. Okay. They do that trade. They want to get a lot better defensively. It really just hasn't happened. The three ball, the consistency, it just hasn't shown. And I think the Wolves, who are a questionable team, I still think they could do it. Now, moving on to the Spurs and Blazers. The Blazers are I don't understand how they're here. I mean, they have a lot better players, and obviously they had a lot of drama to start the year. Obviously, Chauncey Billups was the head coach. He got investigated for gambling. He was put on, on leave. He's not the coach anymore. It's Tiago Splitter, the Spurs, former player, the Hawks former player as well. Kind of just crazy. I mean, he's done a lot with this team. Obviously, they're led by their star player, Denny Avila. Kind of crazy how much he's developed since, he got traded 2 years ago from Watch. I mean, a lot of people thought he was going to be not as good. I mean, I thought he could be good. I thought he could be a 17 points per game player. He's a very all-around player. Obviously that game against the Suns, he was absolutely incredible. They got Klingon, they got Shannon Sharp, Shaden Sharp, Drew Holiday still. Dame, he's questionable still. We'll see. I mean, he could play. Who knows? But it's those minutes on the bench as well. Kamara's been really good, obviously, and he's probably a starter too. Thibault, you got Caleb Love, it's just these minutes. Vit Krejci, who's playing the backup center, Robert Williams, against like a guy versus like Wemby, Cornette. Williams is a very good defender. He's always been a good defender. He just can't stay on the court. But it's a matter of, can he defend a guy like Wemby, who is probably the second greatest player I've ever watched in my life. I wasn't alive to watch Michael Jordan. I mean, he retired when I was one. So it would be LeBron and Wemby. I mean, it's just incredible what that guy is capable of as a 7'3" player with an actual jump shot. He could shoot any fucking three. I mean, he's an elite defender. He's going to win so many Defensive Player of the Year awards. I think this is a series the Spurs probably also sweep. I think Portland could probably take one in five, but the Spurs as a whole, Wemby, you got, De'Aaron Fox. I don't love that trade that they made to get him, but he's just such a good scorer and he's so clutch, and that's what he is so great about. You need a player like that who's when the going gets tough, when you need a bucket, you can't always trust on Wemby. He's getting double De'Aaron Fox. You got Stephon Castle who's taking a real jump, especially in the shooting department. A 3-point shot has really started to develop more. Obviously you have Champagnie, who broke the all-time record for the Spurs for their three-point shooting, which is fucking crazy, honestly. Devin Vassell has been decent. He's a good shooter. He could score as well. Keldon Johnson on the bench as well. Always a good scorer. He's a decent defender. Luke Cornett, like I said, that's where you get like a guy with playoff experience. You get a guy who can play behind Wemby, who can give you good minutes. He gave good minutes for the Celtics. Mitch Johnson gets stick for how he runs his, rotations and whatnot. But I really like how this team is designed, and I think he runs this team pretty freaking well. You know, a guy I absolutely love, Carter Bryant. He's an absolute beast defensively. I'd love to see him play a lot in the playoffs. Obviously, Harrison Barnes has, playoff experience as well. Carter Bryant, he's been shooting the ball better. He's a really good defender. They've been using him in certain spots. If you watch, that Nuggets Spurs game, you know, possible future matchup, the Nuggets obviously, they had Jamal Murray, and he was not as good that game. You watch that second quarter, those minutes where, Wemby's off the floor. What is Carter Bryant doing? He's literally shadowing Jamal Murray all across the floor. He's following him. He's not letting him get open. He's not letting him get the ball. You got to let other players shoot in those Jokic-less minutes, and it worked. They were going on runs. They were having success with it. That's the sort of places where you're going to expect him to play. Denny might be the guy he guards. Sharp. Obviously, Ant maybe in the next round. He can really guard any position. It's pretty incredible. I mean, there were games where Wemby was out. He's guarding Embiid, and Embiid wasn't shooting the ball as much because he's a very good defender. He's very athletic. He's very long, and that's a player I think is going to be really good. Obviously, they have Dylan Harper too. I didn't even mention him, and he's probably going to end up top 3 in Rookie of the Year. Let me stop yapping. Spurs in 4. Pistons Magic. The Magic are a clown show. Obviously, you trade 4 firsts for Desmond Bane, Paulo, Suggs, Franz Wagner, Wendell Carter. This is a team that really needs a reset. And I don't mean a full reset. I like Anthony Black. I like Franz Wagner, although he's injury prone. I like Desmond Bane a lot too. I think he's, a very underrated player. He's a potential all-star, like year to year, in my opinion. The price they paid was a lot, and I just think you have a lot of holes. You're playing Jamal Cain, you're playing Javon Carter, you're playing, Wendell Carter, Goga Bitadze, guys who just can't give you enough quality minutes where I think you can beat a team like Detroit. And I think this is going to, when they lose the series, I think their coach is going to get fired. Jamal Mosley was supposed to be a much better coach this year, and I think, the Pistons, lacking a bit of experience, obviously, last year they played and they did lose in the first round to, New York, but I think this is a way better team. Bickerstaff's done a really good job. Obviously, you have Cade, Tobias Harris, Sar Thompson, obviously a very, very good defender. Very reminiscent of Ben Simmons for me. Obviously, a little worse of a scorer, but he's a very good passer. And, like I said, very good on defense. And then Duran, he's been so good this year. He's taken a huge jump. He is near that, all NBA team. He's a very good defender. behind him, obviously, you have Isaiah Stewart, Paul Reed. I just don't see this team losing more than one game here. Now the Cavs Raptors, nothing really changed here. I think the Raptors probably have one of the most dog shit rotations I've ever seen. If you watch today, you know, it's just bad. I mean, they gave Jakob Poeltl 30 million a year, and that has absolutely backfired. He has been injury prone this year. He has been dog shit this year. You have Jamal Sheed playing a lot. You just didn't get development. Jacoby Walter, Grady Dick, these are guys who you were hoping would be hits in the guard department, and neither one has taken that leap. They've taken steps back as the team's got better. Obviously, you have Barnes, you have Ingram, you have Quickly when he's playing. I like CMB. I think he's a good player going forward. He's super athletic. He's a bit short for a center, but he is a very good rebounder, good defender. Could work on his free throws. But I just don't see the Cavs losing in 5. I think they just have too much size. They have too much shooting. They have too much depth. You got Dennis Schroeder. You got Keon Ellis. You got, Tyson even. You don't got Tristan Thompson playing playoff minutes anymore, which is obviously, beneficial. Thomas Bryant's not a bad player off the bench as well. But they rotate their team very well. Obviously, Kenny Atkinson, they had a disappointing year last year. I feel like he's done a, good job. Obviously, they've been pretty injury prone. Obviously, they make that big trade for James Harden. Max Strus is back now. But I like this team. Sam Merrill, too, on the bench, too. That's the big one I should have mentioned. But Cavs in 5 is my current outlook, even after today. Even before today, really. Knicks, Hawks. Now, I had the Hawks in 6 originally. And I don't hate continuing that because I do think the Hawks are a very underrated team. They're very hot. They just struggle with their scoring because they don't have that, like, Jalen Johnson's been a number 1 for about 3 months, 4 months. Trae Young gets hurt, then they trade him. He was never expected to be the number 1 going into this year. Shit just hit the fan. Obviously they make a bunch of trades. They trade Porzingis, they trade away, Luke Kennard, they trade away, Trae Young, obviously, and they get guys. Gabe Vincent's been playing. He played playoff minutes today. Obviously, like I said, Luke Kennard was very good for the Lakers, but the Warriors trade. Kuminga, you get Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield was good last year, and I'd love to see the guy get minutes because when you're giving minutes to a guy like Zachary Richese, who is one of the worst number 1 overall picks ever, he is closer to Anthony Bennett than Kwame Brown is, which is absolutely incredible. He is probably the second worst number 1 pick in the NBA I've ever seen. It's just insane. I mean, obviously, their GM gets fired because of stuff like that, too. It's kind of crazy. But, the Hawks, Jalen Johnson, very good player, very good, all-around player. He does a lot. He scores. He can rebound. He's a really, really good passer. Obviously, Nickeil Alexander-Walker's taken a huge step. I think he's the most improved player. Dyson Daniels as well has done a really good job on defense. After Trae got traded, he's taken a huge step. Obviously, the shooting, questionable. Today, wasn't very good. But defensively, he's always going to be a huge guy. CJ McCollum. This is not a big team, and obviously, a team with size is really gonna hurt them. I think like a team like Detroit would really hurt them, and I don't think Boston's a team that would stomp right over them because of the same thing. I don't think they have a lot of size. Keita, Vucevic. Vucevic is he plays like a power forward. And that's basically, like Okongwu plays. Okongwu, good shooter. He can really shoot the 3. He's developed his game much more. He's a decent defender. He could score, rebound. He's a decent passer, too. And like I said, McCollum, But you need better playoff minutes off the bench. That's what's going to be crucial for the Hawks to win this series. Corey Kispert, I'd like to see a guy like that play. Obviously, he was part of the Trae Young trade. You gotta do better in the minutes without your starters. Today, 4 or 5 starters were on the bench. You had, Landell's hurt. Mo Gay was in, Gabe Vincent, Rich Asay, Kaminga, and Nikhil Alexander-Walker. That is never going to work. I think Quinn Snyder knows that. He's a good coach. I think he understands that he cannot be running that many, non-starters at the same time. And you need better production from Kaminga, who I thought was pretty piss poor today. He's been very inconsistent. When a good defender's on him, he really struggles. But I still think the Hawks take this series. I do. And now let's move over to the Celtics. Obviously, the Celtics had a crazy, turnaround. They started the season really poorly. Jaylen Brown was really good. Obviously, he was an MVP candidate, top five probably. Maybe might still end top five, but he was definitely a top five candidate at that time. Tatum comes back. And now Tatum, he struggled to shoot the ball, but obviously, he rushes back from Achilles injury. So, I've never seen anything like it. I really didn't think he would play. I didn't know how good he would be. He's been very, very impressive, honestly. You know, he's doing a lot more than just shooting, which is something I always, talked about, with friends and, other people. Just kind of just, you want to see a player develop. And two things that I've always had a problem was, you know, doing more for the team, rebounding, passing, and then the other, similar to how, Jokic plays, where he's super, like, multi-dimensional. And I hate when Tatum just pulls threes, because I think, when he gets in the paint, I don't know how many players can actually stop him. Jaylen Brown's obviously been really good. But the big thing with the Celtics, I worry about the minutes, obviously Derek White's very good. Kata has been good. Obviously the Sixers don't have Joel Embiid, which is really beneficial for the Celtics. But I worry about, when Peyton Pritchard's playing, Sam Hauser. These are guys I don't have confidence in because I don't think they're good defenders. And in the playoffs, all these guys who are bad defenders are, getting shipped away. The Celtics are trusting in, Ron Harper Jr., Vucevic. These are just not, I don't know how far they can go with guys like that. I still think the Celtics win at 5. I think the Sixers probably take one at home, just, out of all, like, respect or whatever. I still think that's probably best case scenario for them. 5 or 4, but I would give a gentleman's sweep there. Obviously, you have Maxey, you have Paul George, you have VJ, Oubre. You have the shooting, Quentin Grimes even. Trade McCain for whatever fucking reason, but whatever. Who knows? Drummond's gonna have to be clutch. I think he's gonna be having to start every game. Obviously, he is, you know, improved at 33, which is a rarity. He's become a better shooter. He's a better team player than he was before. Obviously, he was a big stat merchant for Detroit for a long, long time, and this is a guy who didn't play defense. He was just a throwaway, basically. He just was kind of just floating around the league, and he developed that shot, and he's become a much, complete player. Obviously, he's not as, skilled offensively anymore, but he could still do a lot for your team. Now, Western Conference Finals, Western Conference Semifinal number 1, the Thunder and the Lakers. Now, I don't think Luka's going to play still. I think he's going to be out. I think Reeves probably could play, and I think this might change the Lakers' fate a little bit. The Lakers could probably sneak 2 games, but playing in OKC is absolutely brutal. I don't think they're a team that could do it. I don't think you're playing without your best player. I love LeBron, but I just don't see it. OKC in 5 for me. I think the Lakers probably take 1. I have a tough time seeing them get swept because they're a very, very good, very well coached team. Obviously, you're going to play 2 games at home. You would expect maybe they sneak 1. I expect them to sneak 1. Now, Spurs Timberwolves, I don't think this is as much of a matchup for the Spurs. I think this is a likely 4-1, 4-2. I think the Spurs just outmatch them, just with pure talent. The bench, like I talked about before, they have so much depth. They have such a good roster. They have so much scoring. The Wolves, that's a team that just can't score enough. Now, this is a hard one. This is probably the hardest one in the semifinals for me. Like I said, I picked in 5 games on the last two. Who knows? Pistons Cavs is a tough one. I like the Pistons. I think this is a team that's ready to take the next step. I just don't think the Cavs have it, man. I don't. Mobley's too inconsistent. Harden's a playoff choker. Mitchell's a playoff, choker of sorts. Trusting a lot of guys who are good, but don't, you know, who knows what you're going to get. Max Strus, obviously he was great for the Heat back then, but it's a seam with Gabe Vincent. You just don't know how many, quality minutes that a guy like that could give you. Tyson, he's been very good. Sam Merrill, he's very good when but he's super inconsistent. If he's shooting poorly, he's not helping. He's just absolutely like killing the team completely, with his shooting, and it's just gonna, lead to shit going poorly. That's gonna lead to games like the Pacers last year, where it's just you can't pull away. And I don't think Jared Allen's that good. I think he's probably gonna get dominated by Duran. I don't think this is gonna go very favorable for the Cavs. I think they could probably sneak 2 games off pure talent, but I still think the Pistons probably win in 6. Celtics Hawks. I like the Hawks. Like I said before, I don't think they're going to win the series, though. I'm a big Jalen Johnson fan. I like this team going forward. Obviously, they have, 2 first-round picks very early. They have, you know, New Orleans from that Dejounte Murray trade, and they have the Bucks. They have the better of the two. The Bucks would get the worst one of the two. That's a chance to get a top 7 pick with 2 different picks. I think that is pick 7, and I think that's pick 10, 9, one of the two. That is a good chance to get a very good player going forward. Obviously, the forward play could be better. Besides Jalen Johnson, you're playing 3 guards with Alexander Walker, Dyson Daniels, and C.J. McCollum. I think this is a team that could probably push the Celtics to 6, maybe 7. Probably not, though. The Celtics just have too much talent. Tatum, Brown, Derek White. I just don't think the Hawks can hang with it. The Hawks have played well against them. Oh, I just chose the wrong team. The Hawks have played well against them this season, but I don't see it. I don't see them beating the Celtics. Unless, they'd have to play so well. OKC, San Antonio. Now this is the hardest one on here, without a shadow of a doubt. OKC versus San Antonio. OKC's coming off winning a ring. This is a team, you know, that is really deep, really deep. You got Shea, you got J-Dubs, you're making trades where you're adding, Jared McCain, who is a guy who could come in and shoot and score. Aaron Wiggins is another guy who could come in, score a lot. Kason Wallace, super underrated. Obviously you have Isaiah Joe, you have Lou Dort, one of the most hated players in the league. Hardenstein, Chet. It's just incredible how much talent they have, man. I don't think they win the series, though. I don't. And it's just I don't think they look as good this year. They're a team who's just been owned by San Antonio. And obviously, when you have the best, probably the best player in the sport this year with Shea, and probably the MVP with Shea, I just don't think the pieces around him are as good this year. J-Dubs has been hurt. He hasn't been as good. Chet's been worse. Hardenstein's been hurt. I just, how trustworthy are these guys? There's a lot of red flags for OKC for me. Obviously, besides Shea. And I think that could signify, a busy off season for their GM. And Sam Presti's going to have a lot of decisions to make because he's got guys paid a lot of money. He has 2 picks that could end up really well. The Clippers pick 12 right now in the lottery. And that's from the Shea trade. 2019, man. 2019, the Paul George trade. He's Philly's pick. Philly's probably going to get first rounded. And they're going to give them, a top 17, 18 pick. the Jazz, if they finish outside, I believe the top six, OKC gets it. That's not good, bro. That's not good. It's just, it's not going to be good for the future, but I don't think they're going to take it this year. I just don't see them beating the Spurs right now. I got Spurs in 6. Now this is going to be a hard one because I'm very anti-Celtics. I am. And I like the Pistons. I think they have the size to beat the Celtics. I do. But when it's getting down to it, the Celtics have more playoff experience, unfortunately. And I think the Celtics probably sneak this game. And I think they, it goes to 7, but I think the Celtics probably win it. Now, the Celtics and Spurs. I think the Spurs just have too much for them. I, you know, Obviously Tatum making the finals would be absolutely incredible. Obviously he tore his Achilles not even a year ago. It was the Eastern Conference semifinal. I believe it was game 5. Um, it looked terrible. I remember it, and I thought, he'd probably be out next year. Maybe they would be bad and they get a good pick, and here they are. Here I am picking them in the finals to make the finals. But I don't think they have enough for San Antonio. I don't know who would host the final actually, but I'm pretty sure it'd be San Antonio because they had a better record. But I still think the Spurs take this in 5 games. How many total points will be scored in Game 1 of the NBA Finals? Good question. I'm going to go with 217. I don't know who that is. Well, we're good. The Spurs is my pick. Who knows? OKC is probably going to make it a pretty good battle. And I'm really excited to see how the Spurs play tomorrow. 9 p.m. Lock in. Maybe I'll be wrong by the end of the first series. The Hawks is probably the big series. Obviously Wolves too. I took both 6 seeds. Are both 6 seeds going to win? Maybe not. But I like to think so. I like to think they have a good chance, and I think they can do it this year. Let's submit. Here is my bracket, my pick'em bracket challenge. And that is all for me, and I will see y'all in the next video. So, go Spurs, right? Peace out.